Well, hi everyone. My name is Bobby Milstein from Rethink Health and Ripple Foundation on behalf of a really extended team with Community Initiatives Network and many colleagues who you'll hear from today. I want to welcome you to a second in a series of webinars on moving from recovery to renewal. There are a lot of web resources related to this on thriving.us and on the recovery to renewal page there. I'm going to take a few minutes at the top to set some context for our dialogue today. It is the second in a series, and so I'll just bring forward some of the highlights from the dialogue that we had a few weeks ago, and then turn it to my colleague Shoma Shaha to introduce three community stories who have each of them something to teach us about what it takes to be a steward of change in this moment of historic opportunity. And then we're going to end with a dialogue session in breakouts with you about the power of dialogue as a means to create change and to connect with each other in new ways. So the first thing to recognize about this moment is that there is a remarkable harmony in changes that are occurring in communities across the country, as well as new thinking and new resources that are coming through across the federal government. For more than a year and a half now, there's been joint action and joint contemplation about what does it mean to focus on long-term recovery and resilience, and to organize that around an expectation of all people and places thriving together. And how can we bring our actions and our resources and our heart and our hands to the places that most matter. And so a little bit about this move from recovery to renewal is connecting the resources and the mandate for change from all parties, federal and non-federal, together. That's largely what inspired us to gather resources together on the recovery to renewal page, to bring pragmatic tools and resources together, things that were recommended by stewards who are doing this work in communities across the country, and in many ways have been doing it for years, but without the kind of assets that are now beginning to flow in new ways in this moment. So the basic message around this time of possibility is that it's a time to rethink the way we've done things before, to bring different mindsets and practices and strategies to bear that can leverage an unprecedented opportunity. And that means making the most of it, to dream bigger maybe than we've ever done before, to think not, why don't we do X, Y, or Z, but why not? If we don't have a grand aspiration, and in some ways we're diminishing what's possible even from the start. There is an urgency to use resources in the moment, and of course, sweeping crises have led to a lot of urgent need that's all around us, and that inspires quick action and trying to be swift about the changes that are needed in the moment. At the same time, we can slow down and think about the long intergenerational struggle for equity and justice, and being able to actually play our part in the moment in an epic effort to bend the arc of history in a new direction. And that means slowing down and seeing our work in the present in a much bigger context. Of course, centering equity in this work and building those connections that allow everybody to feel that they belong and that they have things to bring, that we can use our civic muscle together to be able to do things that none of us could be able to do alone. If we're going to dream big, it can't be just a wish list. It has to be something that we actually have the civic muscle to be able to accomplish together, working across lines of color and class and gender and party, even to be able to act as stewards of a common world together and a common future. And of course, we're going to have to measure what matters. The measurement of this work is absolutely essential to locate our values and not just use measures as a way to demonstrate that we have problems. Everybody knows that we have challenges in our midst. The issue is, can we use measures to show how close are we getting to a future that is designed for all people and places to thrive? And if we're not getting there swiftly and equitably, then who's being left behind, and how do we restructure our work in ways that make sure that all people are thriving with no exceptions? And measurement therefore can be used as a way to drive movement toward a very different future, as opposed to just using it to remind ourselves that we have problems in our midst. We heard from three well-positioned national leaders in the earlier webinar. Sarah Truhoff from PolicyLink reminded us about the sheer scale of the problems. 100 million people economically insecure, mostly Black and Brown communities and Indigenous communities, and the possibilities of being able to think about the scale of that need, so that we are not indifferent to the urgent crises of the moment, but we are also not kidding ourselves about the degree of transformative change that's needed, and that we need to build those building blocks now if we're ever going to be able to tell a different story about change on the scale of hundreds of millions of fellow Americans. Each of those earlier colleagues left us with some amazing resources, which are available on the Recovery to Renewal website and are also in these slides, which we'll share. Mike Wallace from the National League of Cities, for his part, reminded us about just how often we don't see local leaders in the lead, right? We don't necessarily see cities as the incubators of solutions. They're, in his view, often treated as part of the problem, and the flexibility of the resources available to us in this moment, for the first time in a long time, really treat cities as the incubators of solutions that they can be. And Karen Minyard recognizes that there are so many assets at our disposal. It's really easy to have a kind of scarcity mindset in this work, but if we really take a look not only at the unprecedented federal assets that are beginning to flow through multiple mechanisms, not just the Recovery Act, but the infrastructure bill and executive orders and still the CARES Act from a year and a half ago. But then combine that with the assets that are present in state governments and county governments and in towns and communities and philanthropies and businesses. We have, the challenge of being able to match multiple sources to the multiple uses that we have in mind. And we can do more than we may often assume if we can bring those assets to bear in an agenda that's built to move. And of course, we can't do that through our typical fragmented organizational lines of action. We're going to have to do that by building a bigger we, and by building our civic muscle to be able to use all of our assets at our disposal to direct them toward an agenda that is built for everyone to thrive. So my last comment here is a reminder about how we think about this legacy moment. It is a time when lots of us are struggling and suffering, and there's a demand for urgent services. And an absolute mandate to deliver those urgent services humanely and equitably and at scale. But there is no amount of urgent services that can produce the experience of thriving. That has to come by investing in a set of vital conditions that everybody needs all the time without exception. And chief among them is that sense of belonging and civic muscle. If we can become a bigger we, if we can pool our assets together and work across difference, then there's really no stopping what we can do to assure a thriving natural world and invest in the basic needs for health and safety, clean air and clean water and nutritious food and freedom from addiction and crime and violence and trauma. We can assure humane housing and meaningful work and wealth and lifelong learning, reliable transportation, and continue to invest in that ever sort of contested challenge of who is part of the big American we, and how are we having sort of the capacity to do things. And those are present physical actions, but all these legacies are ones that we inherit. They are the reflection of choices made long before we ever were born, and we're going to pass them on to generations to come. So it's really about our legacies for living together that matter. And that's what allows us to bend that arc of history toward a new direction, to renew our civic life, our economic life, our social, emotional, and spiritual lives. So I'm going to turn this to Shoma, who can talk about what it takes to build our capacity to steward this kind of maneuver, to work together as shared stewards in a movement for well-being, equity, and racial justice. So Shoma, please take it from here.
Thank you so much, Bobby. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Shoma Shaha. I lead Wellbeing and Equity in the World and the Wellbeing in the Nation Network, together with many of my colleagues here on this call that steward that network together. And so as we think about this work, you know, I always call it theory of change just our way of seeing the world and how it can be transformed. And, you know, when we think about this, we start with an acknowledgement that there are these legacies for living together that have been with us since the founding of this country, since before the founding of this country. And that those legacies, some of dignity and inclusion, many others of trauma and exclusion, have shaped whether some people have all of those vital conditions, are more likely to have those vital conditions that we all need to thrive, and whether they don't. And in fact, exist in adversity that we have engineered so well that we've built an entire economy and that profits from the existence of adversity. And when we have a whole system and an economy and policies and structures that sustain that, what we know is that while we may say we want everyone to be thriving, and that in fact there is a great deal of struggling and suffering that is embedded as a system outcome that's entirely predictable. And so when we understand that, if you go to the next slide, in our belief, we need to do several things. Now, a lot of the time we focus on response, and right now, a lot of us are working on an equitable response and are in full, how do we rescue people who are in this current moment? In our work, we say that we in the world that a burning platform is a terrible thing to waste. And so in fact, the stories that you're going to hear today are the stories of people who understand that full picture, who have seen firsthand and sometimes experienced firsthand those legacies that for living together, some of which are inclusion and many others of exclusion, who've seen that in proximity with communities every day, and have chosen to not just work in the vertical axis to make sure we restore people to those vital conditions one by one, but if you go to the next slide, are using and leaning into this moment to reclaim the fuller story of why this is happening, of what it looks like to be in relationship, to build greater civic muscle and capacity, and then to chart that path toward long-term renewal. To really shift those policies and systems to build new legacies for the next generations. And so today I'm really excited to welcome three of my favorite. I feel so fortunate in this work to be in proximity with so many of you who are to truly embody what it means to transform the world with a transformative mindset with practical feet. And today, three of those folks are here today. Chiquita Lacine from Shackle Free in North Carolina, Veronica Holloway from the Illinois Department of Public Health, and Ariane, where are you, Ariane? I'm just looking for, is there any way to spotlight the speakers?
Right here.
Perfect. Ariana Corrente from the Rhode Island Department I'm so sorry, the Rhode Island Foundation. It is a privilege to have each of you on the call, and I'm going to start by asking each of you to introduce yourself with a question, with just what brings you to this work? What's your why that moves you to lean into long-term renewal, even in a moment that so many people are focused on just a short-term response? What's your why? Let's start with Chiquita. What's your why?
Hello, everyone. Chiquita Lacine, CEO of Shackle Free Community Outreach Agency in North Carolina, Duplin County, so rural North Carolina. My why, I just posted in the chat. So if we could click on that and share that for me, that would be great.
Sorry. Is it?
Bobby, is it easier for me to share it?
Maybe, I'm not sure what it's doing for me.
I've got it. No worries, I've got it.
Go for it.
Who are these folks, Shaquita?
So these are some of the 15. When I first met Shoma, she came and spent some time with us, came into my office, and the first thing she saw was this picture on my wall in my office, on our bulletin board in our office. These are the faces of some of the people that we lost in Duplin County due to health disparities and violence and things like that. A number of them are children that I actually had in my camp. But this is only a snapshot. We are up to over 20 at this point. And so this is my why. This is why I do what I do, is for situations like this.
Thank you, Shaquita.
Well,
Ariane?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ariane Carenti. I'm the Vice President of Communications and Marketing at the Rhode Island Foundation. And I would say my why is inspiration from my family. So my dad and my grandfather in particular, who are both military veterans, and instilled in me in an early age the importance of engaging in civic life and policy change. And I have spent the better part of my career organizing and training mostly women and public health advocates around public policy advocacy and policy change. And then sort of went into government on the city side, and also having served a member of Congress, and then brought that spirit into philanthropy, which sometimes is a place where engaging in the civic side of things and community dialogue in a really authentic way is missing. And so, we've been trying to really move the needle on that in Rhode Island. So that's what I'm inspired by.
Thank you so much. Veronica?
My why is that it just finally clicked. It just finally felt right. My background initially had nothing to do with public health, nothing to do with, health concerns, politics, policies. And so I was always in my job, never felt fulfilled. I went into, I love to draw, I love to paint. It keeps me grounded, it keeps me focused. So that was my initial background. And then I was like, I got to make a living out of this. So I went to graphic design. I was like, okay, I ended up volunteering a lot of my time, to organizations that didn't have the resources to hire. And so then I did my master's in communications and somehow landed in public health with my communications background, which actually worked well. And then finally, I was afforded a project that had to do with addressing the impact of HIV in Black communities and Black populations. And it finally felt like I had finally landed, and now I can relate. And now I can bring that knowledge that I have through, communications, through my artwork, and create initiatives that would engage youth, because my focus was mostly on youth and younger adults, and then the senior population. So it afforded me an opportunity to be really creative with my artwork and bringing that into the health arena, and then working with youth and young adults to inspire and keep me going, and then really get a lot of inspiration too from older adults. And so it just finally felt right. And now I feel like I have fulfilled my life's calling, or at least I am fulfilling my life's calling.
Thank you so much. So each of you has a different approach to how you're manifesting that in terms of recovery and renewal and reclamation. And I wondered, Ariane, can you share a little bit about what you're doing in terms of participatory budgeting and the kinds of initiatives you're doing in Rhode Island?
Sure. So the foundation itself is not super engaged in the participatory budgeting side of things, although that is happening in some of our municipalities. And my previous work for the city of Providence, it was something that we were, which was over 10 years ago now, but it's something that we were sort of inching towards. But at the Rhode Island Foundation, we're the state's only community foundation. And I think I saw one other Rhode Islander on this Zoom. So just a shout out, because sometimes there's not so many of us. Hello there, other Rhode Islander. So we're the state's only community foundation, largest funder of nonprofit organizations in the state. We're about 105 years old. Just for context, last year in 2021, we did about $76 million in grant making to local organizations. And one of the things that we've really been focusing on over the last 10 years at the foundation is our civic leadership and civic engagement work. And, acting as more of a leader in that space across the state and engaging community and being sure that community voice is part of the policy advocacy process in the state as well. So when the American Rescue Plan Act passed last year, we started to initiate conversations with our congressional delegation, governor, speaker of the House, Senate president, and let them know that as the state's community foundation, we wanted to pull together community leaders and big thinkers to help develop a framework for spending the state discretionary share of ARPA dollars. So for Rhode Island, that's about just over $1 billion in state fiscal recovery funds. And so we initiated that last April. The process ran for about 6 months. We worked with 2 local policy organizations on both sides of the political spectrum. So one that is traditionally a business advocacy organization, and one in the Economic Progress Institute that is traditionally an advocacy organization for underserved communities in Rhode Island. And we paired them together along with this 15-member steering committee that we had recruited, and came up first and foremost with a set of guiding principles, 4 guiding principles that the group developed. And those were equity, sustainability, impact, and process. And there's much more behind those 4 on our website, where you can find the report and the results of the work. And they sort of agreed on those principles, and that would be the framework for their dialogue and their decision making, and for dialogue among community members. Because the second sort of most important part of our work was robust community engagement. The steering committee was very supportive, and they were wonderful and they were smart, but just like many of us on this call, for the most part, really privileged and a little bit disconnected from the true needs, of Rhode Islanders. So we wanted to make sure we were really hearing from community and having dialogue with community, and letting what we heard really influence the decision making that the committee was making around how the state might spend ARPA dollars, and then using that to advocate to state leaders.
Clicking onto a webinar that I was supposed to have been on.
So I will stop there, and glad to talk more about the community engagement piece when time allows.
Thank you so much. It sounds like a really systematic approach to that so many communities across states would have benefited from in this moment. What a great example. Veronica, what does this look like for you in Illinois?
So I, again, I'm not directly involved in, the overall look and discretion of how the ARPA dollars and other COVID-related dollars are dispersed. But what little I have through my office, I have total autonomy over. So the first thing that we decided to do that benefited the state office public health department as a whole was make sure that it doesn't matter which program had what funding, that we were all looking at how we were distributing our funding dollars in an equitable way. So the first thing that we did was develop what we called our health equity checklist, kind of looked at some examples that other states had drafted, and then we drafted our own. And with the premise of it was to make sure that if you have funding that's going towards for whatever it is, and it just doesn't have to do with just ARPA or COVID-related dollars, but in all our grant funding moving forward, all applicants have to utilize the health equity checklist. There are 7 questions that are contained in that checklist, which in general asks, how are you going to engage your community in these dollars? How are you going to engage your disparately impacted communities with this dollar? So as you're writing your work plan, you have to go through these 7 sets of questions and incorporate those into your work plan. I will tell you, change is hard. We have been doing this coming up on 1 year now. Every grant opportunity that goes out of our office has to go through the checklist. We have been experiencing pushbacks, but with strong leadership, we have been able to stay firm. The other good piece about it is that 35% out of the 100 overall 100% award for the grant is focused on the health equity checklist. So you have to have it right. You have to have it incorporated into your work plan. And it's a big portion of the grade. So we're working through that right now. We have organizations that, have justifiable questions, and, some questions we, just based on, the kinds of response we're getting, we've sensed sounds confusing for some. So we are working through our health equity checklist now to make it more user-friendly. But yeah, that's one of the things that we're pushing, making sure that all our funding opportunities are through our equity lens.
Thank you so much, Veronica. Imagine if all funding had to actually meet that. That's a great example of a system shift that would have so much impact. Shaquito, what does this look like for you, deeply on the ground? And how have you been approaching this work?
Okay, so yeah, we are definitely on the ground all the time. We designed holistic events. Again, I speak the language of poverty, unfortunately and fortunately, because if some of us don't walk these walks, then we'll never understand how to truly help people that are living in similar situations. So it's more like a peer support type, taking professional and personal, putting it together and creating this explosion of holistic, from a holistic approach. We actually host events monthly. Those events bring food and other resources for housing, bring those things together, and that actually draws people that live in rural, low-income, BIPOC communities, historically marginalized communities. In Duplin County, the majority of our areas is strictly agricultural, textile production, and things like that. We're known for our wine and we're known for our hogs in Duplin County. So we're talking about getting deeply into southern rural areas where there is nothing. So what we've been doing is utilizing our beauty and barbershops as our trusted messengers, holding these events at beauty and barbershops, because in every area there is always a beauty and barbershop or some type of service in that way being provided where everyone goes to. So what we're doing is bringing it down to the level where it makes sense for the populations that we are trying to target. And we're being intentional with that, with the targeting, and being very intentional. We have not had very much support, I would say, from the local level. All of the support that we've received has come from the federal and state level in our initiative. So it's almost like our local officials need to be a little more educated on exactly what it takes in order to make this thing happen and to create change and to create a thriving environment. So that's our approach. We get down to, going where they are, bringing the services that are not readily available in rural communities to those communities. And we do that by addressing those socioeconomic factors, the food, the homelessness, the housing homelessness, mental health, just something as basic as that will draw people, and that'll give you opportunity to speak to them. And again, using the trusted messengers in the community, the barber and beauty shops has worked well for us. And we're still working on this initiative hard. But like I said, again, we went, Shoma actually came down and visited with me. We went to the town of Green Everett, which is a small town in Duplin County. She went with me to a city council meeting. And while at that meeting, we both spoke and presented population health to them about how it takes everyone to come together to make this happen for the communities. And again, it's met with a lot of resistance. At the end of the day, the citizens and the people who are living in poverty are the ones that suffer from that. There's no way that people can focus on vaccine, you know, to kind of stall back the vaccine hesitancy whenever they're homeless or whenever they're hungry, or, you know, when they don't know, you know, where to go for mental health, or there's no resources available. If you guys were to jump on 211 right now with United Way and do a search in Duplin County and try to find resources, you're not going to find any. And so it's almost like you're trying to get people to be responsible for their health, but that is not priority for them if they don't have anywhere to live. And so what we do is try to get those wraparound services available. And again, the American Rescue Act plan funding that we sought, again, it's being used for salaries. It's being used for things that are not going to build up the community. So that's what Shackle Free does. We get down and try to break those generational shackles and curses that plague our families and try to help them to reach that level of self-actualization, so that they are thriving, which is actually what you guys are talking about here today.
And Shaquita, you know, a lot of people help connect people to resources. Some might think of that as just an urgent response, and it is. But one of the things that I think really distinguishes the way you do your work is both like building systems that can meet people's needs reliably, like it's contributing to the development of NC 360, building that civic capacity through the barbershops and beauty salons. And then the other part is that trying to engage civic leaders to invest in the things that led to people being in those conditions and needing that help in the first place. And I think that's what the translation that often we don't see in communities that I think you've modeled so beautifully. So I'd love for us to go one level deeper into some specific strategies or practices that have helped you deepen community engagement, or what we call the multi-solving strategy, which is where you do one kind of thing and it helps address a whole bunch of things together. Shaquita, I think about the kinds of vaccine food expungement and other events that you do. They never address one thing alone. That's even in the process of current pieces. But what are other examples of sort of multi-solving strategies that are bold and innovative that each of you have some experience in? And any of you can go first. Since you're shy, Ariane.
I'll start. I'll start. I'll talk a little bit about the community engagement and dialogue sort of that was part of the process for Make It Happen, which is what we called our ARPA work at the foundation. So, and we did I actually spoke about it often with the steering committee as a multi-layered approach. And it wasn't, at the end of the day, I will say very truthfully, it was not just about informing the process for us for ARPA. It was an opportunity that we saw at the foundation to learn more about the real acute needs of the community, which we hear a lot about from the organizations that we fund who are on the ground. But oftentimes our team itself isn't necessarily having those conversations. And it's important for our team to have those conversations, particularly our community investments team. And what we were able to learn from this impacted the recommendations that the committee made around ARPA, which are really, will hopefully, if the state, adopts the funding allocations that we've suggested, will move us towards long-term sustainable change. But also have really informed our community investments team and align really strongly with the foundation's strategies for funding strategies, which have been focused for just over 10 years now on educational success and healthy lives and economic security. And so we heard a lot from the community that has really helped overall inform our work at the foundation. But just very quickly, so the strategy that we used around community engagement for the ARPA process specifically, the first piece was soliciting electronic submissions and ideas, just like big brainstorming from the community through our website, through social media. And we were able to solicit just over 400 different ideas through around 350 submissions from across the state. We actually created and put out a toolkit that people then filled out and pushed back to us their ideas, and those were all considered by the steering committee. We did over 60 individual interviews, one-on-one interviews with nearly 150 people. So it was 60 separate sessions. Some had multiple people in them that were conducted by the Economic Progress Institute and the Rhode Island Public Expenditure Council, which were the two nonprofits that we worked with on the research side. And those were really focused on community leaders, nonprofit leaders, and folks like that. And then we did a series of focus groups and community visioning sessions. So we did 5 anonymous focus groups that were focused specifically on communities hardest hit by COVID. And their top priority areas that came across were access to healthcare, access to affordable, safe housing, job opportunities, access to technology, environmental issues, and transportation was, of course, one of the big ones. And then we did 11 community visioning sessions in partnership with Cortico, which I know is an organization that some of you are familiar with, and local nonprofit organizations that have a funding relationship with the foundation. So we were able to sort of co-host these community visioning sessions across the state. We engaged 125 Rhode Islanders. And the topics that really rose to the top in those conversations were housing. They were the impacts of COVID-19 directly on people's homes and families, work, all of those kinds of things, behavioral health needs, and jobs, quality of education, and just generally lack of economic security within communities. I will stop there.
For you, it sounds like community engagement itself was the multi-solver that helped bring these pieces together.
Yep,
Thank
absolutely.
you, Ariane. Veronica, how have you been multi-solving?
So I would say that even though we were doing some kind of community outreach and engagement, and of course, through all of our funding streams, even before COVID, had to do with, linkage, education awareness, and always linkage to wraparound services as well as clinical services. But I think COVID was a real blessing in disguise that we were able to do that in a much broader scale. So the first thing we did, and I have to give you and some of my, little background, education background too, but I have to give you some credit for that, Soma, because little did I know that I think it was 2017 or 2018 that you were actually prepping me for this rodeo show. And so I, participated in 100 million Healthier Lives project that Soma was undertaking. We applied, we got invited into the project, and we got to work with a small community in northern part of Illinois, Kankakee County, to kind of help to see what collaboration, sustainability, and resilience would look like. So we were on a winning trajectory. Everything, we had the right players in place. We were forming these partnerships. We were going after grants together. The community was starting to trust us, because I always say, I remember the first time we showed up in this community, right? And so we had this meeting. We were like, oh, we just want to come, learn from you guys, understand what your needs are, and see how we as a partner can work with you to work towards your goals. And so I remember this older lady got out of the meeting and she said, okay, so all I want to know is, how much is the state giving us? Who's going to get that money? And what do you want us to do with the money? And so the room kind of went quiet for a minute, and everybody started looking at me. I was like, it was your bright idea. So now what? So I said to her, I'm like, it's not that kind of relationship. I said, we are here in it together. We have no preconceived notion of what your needs are. We just know that we as a public health department are focused on health and well-being for everyone. And so we want to work with you to co-create what that would look like in your community. And then she said, well, good, because I am tired of being everybody's social experiment. So that really resonated with me. And, just really, I said, if I ever have an opportunity to have another grant again, I know exactly what that, what that should look like, what we're going to do. We're not going to say, okay, we have diabetes money. Let's go into the community. This is how we want to use your diabetes money. We're going to say, we have this pot of money. What is important for you to reduce your diabetes? What are the levers we need to have in place? Let's work on a plan together. Let's bring in all the partners that need to be in here together so we can leverage all the pots of money that we have in your community to make this happen and build resilience and sustainability. So I do have to give you that shout out. So when COVID happened, guess what we did? When my director called me and said, okay, health equity, what are we doing about that? I'm like, oh yes, collective impact approach. We're stronger together. So let's bring in all these people we haven't talked to in forever and try to win their trust, because we have to begin with trying to develop that trust, right? And so I reached out to all my community partners that I've worked with. I reached out to other state agencies because I'm like, you guys have, some funding that we can leverage here, or ideas and information that we can share. Reached out to our institutions, our grassroots organizations, our faith-based, and formed our COVID equity team. And it was, statewide. And so didn't come easy. There was a lot of hostility at the start, but at the end of the day, what really, the things that remain with me is people want to know that you're talking to them and not talking at them. They want to feel that they own this, they co-own this with you. So COVID is not just a IDPH initiative. We're all in it together. And so your input counts as much as my input counts, and that we're accountable to each other. So, so that's the strategy that I'm using with my funded money to see how we can do these in, identified communities. So I'm looking to create community empowerment zones where we could bring these same, this framework and new way of, working with our community partners to create sustainability and resilience.
Thank you, Veronica. So it sounds like, gosh, I heard a whole bunch of things, but key to multi-solving is maybe sharing power and starting with listening to the community itself, making unprecedented collaboration to pool resources across agencies, knowing that takes a lot of hard work, and then in really investing in a place-based way, if you think about community empowerment zones, so that those resources can come together to create a much deeper transformation that's defined by the community. Thank you. That's amazing. Shaquita, everybody said no one wanted to ever follow Shaquita in any of these questions, so you're going to get the last word. Tell us what multi-solving has looked like for you. And you had some slides that you might want to share.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Shoma. Briefly, I just want to tell the other presenters that you guys are doing some awesome work, and I just love the collaboration, the feel of the partnerships. The whole mood here is great. And I want to thank Shoma also because she helped to launch us into where we are headed with this. And when you're in a low income area, your rural area, it's sort of hard to get heard. And so it's almost divine that she actually invested some interest into Shackle Free and what we have going on in such a small area. It's like we're almost non-existent, but the things that we have to share affects the whole entire world. And I believe that we have something that we can build upon here. If you'll go ahead, Bobby, thank you for helping with the slide deck. You can go ahead and click on hello, or go to the next slide. There we go. Just to share really quick about Shackle Free to help make sense of what I'm about to say. This is our mission and purpose. We do address everything holistically. And on the right, the purpose, these are action words that we use to address increased awareness in historically marginalized rural communities of color and beyond in a better way of life. Next slide. Really quickly, these are our agency programs on the left. I'll explain in a few minutes why we have so many extensions of Shackle Free, but they all fall under our You Are Well North Carolina initiative. The United Rural Health and Wellness Initiative of North Carolina actually puts together resources of every type On the right, you'll see the shackle-free buzz. That is our vehicle that we utilize to communicate information and to engage the community. One of the main ones that we have is the Barber and Beauty Professionals one, and we're working on all the other dimensions that you see listed there: veterans, LGBTQ, faith-based, meatpacking, Latinx, and so on and so forth. Next slide. The Your Well initiative that we have listed here actually begins with a well-being survey and assessment. You take the assessment, then you're contacted by one of our Duke certified, partner with Duke University, the Cancer Institute there, to certify our community health ambassadors for service navigation using NC Care 360. I will add that NC Care 360 is a grant that I wrote about 7 years ago. And I had no idea that divinely, again, I would be actually utilizing a platform that I wrote a grant to bring. And I'm no longer with the agency that I was with before. So, but to the right, you'll see more about what Shoma and I talk about all the time when we're together, is that this is a quote here that I like to reference. Health is more than absence of disease. It's about jobs and employment, education, the environment, and so on and so forth. But what we try to do is help individuals to build, to go from maybe a state of crisis. We use Maslow's hierarchy of needs to try to, let them know where they are on the scale, but really helping them to understand where they are, not telling them where they are, but helping them to see the things that are on the scale and how you can be in a crisis situation, have things missing, but then you can also be on your way to advance towards self-actualization. Like, who am I? What powers do I have within me that I'm able to utilize? You can go to the next slide. Awesome. Why are we doing this? Again, I showed a picture of who I call my boys, children, 3 of them that I showed in the picture when we first started off introducing ourselves. They are going on. We are now up to over 20 youth under the age of 30 who actually have lost their lives in Duplin County within a matter of months. Like, every time we turn around, there's a loss of life. And everything to me, because I've been involved and I've been invested in the community, I've known these children and their parents and everybody from birth. And, so I know their stories. And so that gives me the opportunity, which sometimes is very, very hard to address these things. When they sat in your kitchen, at your kitchen table and ate dinner with you, they're my son's best friends, 2 of them, and they died within a month of each other. But if you will be so kind, Bobby, to click on the how, I would like to take you to the buzz. And I want, maybe this will probably wake me up again. I've been listening to such great information, but share a few pictures with you to actually let you see what the initiative looks like and in a response to Shoma's question. So I hope it'll play. I don't know, it's not playing yet on my screen. But again, the shackle-free buzz is something that we came up with, like I said, again, using trusted messengers in the community to relay information. We all trust our barbers and beauticians on our hair, on our appearance and things like that. So it made sense to utilize those barbers and beauticians to help us spread the word and to also help to build that civic engagement by building help teams. So our beauty and barber professionals actually are in the process of building their own help teams after they become certified health ambassadors, receiving training on cancer, diabetes, hypertension, mental health, men's health, women's health, you name it. That's what the barbers and beauticians already give advice on. They're already trusted by the individuals that come and see them. And there is a barber and beauty shop located in every low income and rural area. People are gonna go get their hair done. They're gonna go get that pampering or just stop by to have a conversation with their barber or beautician. And so within all that, it made more sense for us to actually utilize that platform to spread messages about the vaccine, about vaccine equity, to address systems of hesitancy, to also encourage individuals to share different things, about themselves. So really quickly, it's only a minute and 44 seconds here for this video, but I'd like to welcome you guys to the Shackle-Free Buzz. I only have 10 seconds, Shoma, to go through all of them, so it's gonna be pretty fast. But they are the trusted messengers in every community. The history of the barber surgeon, their history is embedded in medical. Could you pause real quick on this slide? Oops, can we go back just one time to that one? If it'll let you back up a little bit. I just wanted to share really quick on the slide before that. The barbershop and the beauty shop, again, is where everything happens. All the conversations take place there. And so it made a whole lot of sense, again, like I said, and sense in the monetary form for us to utilize these barbershops and beauty shops in order to spread the messages about cancer, diabetes, chronic disease, self-esteem, accessibility, women's health, relationships. This slide here shows you the identified issues and then what we did to address them. All of these things you see on the left here are actually what is happening in Duplin County right now as we speak. There is an overflow of socioeconomic conditions that affect Duplin County. They're number one, well, Wilmington is number one, which is a neighboring county in opioid abuse. Jacksonville is number 12. Duplin County sits directly in between Wilmington and Jacksonville. Transportation issues. And I would like to let you guys know that there are no services being provided by our local government, support to address those issues. The needs assessments there, I serve on the steering committee, they get worse and worse every year. So we've gone from a tier 2 to a tier 1. Nothing has changed at all. And now we add COVID-19 and the fact that we have environmental disasters that plague Duplin County. My mother lost everything in the storm. So you add all of those things onto the lack of care, the substance abuse and mental health issues, the chronic disease, the prevention healthy lifestyle, the lack of that, and then you end up in poverty. And we're doing the same things we've always done. Again, here is the Maslow's hierarchy. We utilize this to help individuals see their success go from the bottom to the top to help to get them to a level of self-actualization. And this happens through and by them doing assessments at the barbershop, which you see here, we have kiosks located in the barbershop, actually tablets that they can use. And now we've also added binders onto that for accessibility for seniors and elderly people that don't want to use the kiosk. Okay.
We should wrap up at this
Okay.
part.
Okay, if we can fast forward all the way to the end, and I'll share the last slide with you. Right here, what's missing? Again, is the lack of participation on behalf of our local government. That is exactly what's missing, is that there is no connection between the government, the community, the people who are actually living in these situations, improper use of the funding that they already have by way of ARPA, I believe is a good example, and a way for us to financially support and duplicate initiatives that will actually address the health disparities that we have listed here. And there are a number of those. So this is our initiative that we actually present. And again, it's holistic and it's working. So I thank you for the opportunity to bring this to the table. Shoma, you're always so supportive of what we have going on. Sorry, I'm so long-winded, but I get so passionate about what I'm talking about. But I do thank you, and I look forward to any information you guys have to share with Shackle Free. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Akrita. I don't know if you got this, but like her multi-solver is building and growing the entire community to rise up, even in the face of a local government that isn't supportive, to say, how do we just build the assets our community needs, whether it's advocating for a YMCA or making sure there's a bus, really building the civic infrastructure, starting with belonging and civic muscle. Thank you so much for your leadership, Shakrita. All right, let's get talking. Passing it back to you, Bobby.
Actually, it's Stacy.
I'll jump in, but thank you so much, Shoma, for helping to bring these just amazing voices and to be able to lift up the tremendous work and the wonderful reminders about the just deep importance of community engagement, going to our community tables and trusted community members, to inserting the powerful levers of the equity checklist and sort of the investment choices, and Ariana and the foundation really, doing their deep listening from focus groups to visioning and specifically dialogue. And what a simple and powerful way to start as we think about remaking community. Next slide, please. as we think about dialogue, and appreciate Ariane really showcasing a number of the different types of ways that we can connect and listen to one another, dialogue is unique as an opportunity to really listen for what's true for others, to share what's true for you, and to really find some common meaning in those stories. It's an opportunity to really build that relationship and strengthen our sense of belonging. And as Shoma and Bobby have lifted up, that really provides a deeper opportunity to build the civic muscle and to really be able to create and take action together. Never has that perhaps been more important than in these divided times. And just look forward to the tremendous group of people who are here and providing a few minutes for you all to be able to learn and listen more. There are tremendous stories throughout the group of participants in today's webinar. I saw friends from Imagine Fox Cities, Paula and Jason have joined us in the room today. They also have been using dialogue in rich, deep listening ways to help guide and reimagine their local work. And in just a moment, Molly is going to help us get into groups of 3 to 4, and we're offering up a couple of questions that are available in the new dialogue guide for Recovery to Renewal. Elizabeth will help us get that in the chat if it isn't already. And on that resource page, there are also a number of other renewal dialogue guides around economic renewal, social, spiritual, emotional renewal. There's a particular guide to support youth conversation in that. But as we jump in today, lifting up 2 questions. What signs of community renewal would really be most, would you be most excited to see 5 years from now? What are the signals? What starts to show up when we're making these when we're dreaming big and really centering equity? Well, will it take for different community sectors and community voices to work together? And as you all jump into that conversation, would love for you to take just a quick moment to share who you are and the organization that you're with as an opportunity to build some bridges here and make connections as we continue to learn in these spaces together. And Molly, I thank you for helping us transport. Hopefully you've enjoyed having a few moments to connect with some new faces, and perhaps an old friend landed in the same breakout room as you. Would love for each of you, sort of as we're sharing these last few minutes together, to take a moment and drop into the chat. What was a sign or signal that your group talked about? What are folks dreaming big about, hoping to see as a sign of renewal and community? And as folks are dropping those in the chat, was wondering if there might be 1 or 2 voices here that would be willing to share what came up in your smaller group. Feel free to take yourself off mute. And Sharon, I see you in space with us today, wondering if I might invite you to share just a moment what floated to the top for you all.
We basically didn't get to something that we were introducing each other, and found out that, well, Sven and I work in the same state, so we knew each other very well, and he's on my board of directors, so we knew each other. But we spent the time getting to know Paula from Fox Cities in Wisconsin with Theta Care, and actually some discussion around needs assessments and how you engage the community in that. And then I was real interested to find out that Paula also uses the 7 vital conditions framework, and I wanted to pick her brain on that experience, and we ran out of time, so I've got her email now.
It's a wonderful connection, and yeah, a powerful email to have for sure. Glad you are all able to connect. Seeing just folks add, and thank you in the chat, increased sense of belonging and agency, the intentional inclusion of voices, formal and informal representation from the community, all so very important. feel free to continue to add if you have additional thoughts in the chat. And I'm gonna hand it back off to Bobby to just offer a final reflection and close us out today. Thank you all for being with us.
Yeah, this was a special session in a way, because we were beginning to see those signs of renewal even in the dialogue and the stories that were being told here, and the passion that was on display in this work that's in motion. We're really at the edge of sort of uncharted waters here, and what we make in this moment with whatever assets we can bring to bear is going to be, that's why we talk about it as a legacy moment. One thing that I'm looking forward to next month is, we've talked about how there has been a disciplined conversation going on across now almost 30 federal agencies about what they can do to change their relationships in this work, and really support community-directed renewal to take hold. And it looks like in April, there'll be a little bit more sense about how federal agencies are committing their work into this going forward. And that'll be a chance for us all to even think more practically about where this movement can go. So look for some further emails from Thriving.us and the WIN network and the various platforms that we all share in this work. So thank you for your time today, and strength to your work tomorrow. We do have there is a feedback form as well that we were going to put in the chat, right, Elizabeth? We take your feedback immensely seriously, and if you have other stories to share, there probably are other opportunities to be able to do that. So please let us know what you're seeing in your line of work as well. And with that, thanks to everybody, and thanks to the Community Initiatives team for organizing, as always, and being great partners in this work.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all.